it's John McCabe. Welcome to the show. Hey, welcome to the John A. McCabe Show, where it's all about accelerating your authority in your business or field of expertise. And I do that by helping entrepreneurs, business owners, authors, experts, and speakers get seen, get heard, get noticed on any device, anywhere, anytime, as little as 15 hours worth of effort, also known as the Authority Acceleration Blueprint. Today's show is Real Estate Investing Monday, where I discuss the business of real estate investing with my guest. Now, today's guest has been around the investment business for over 20 years and has a wealth of knowledge both in the investment side of the business and the lending aspect of the business as well. Pierre-Paul Turgeon is Canada's leading authority and insider when it comes to investing in apartment buildings because of his unique perspective on this type of investment. He's a former CMHC multifamily underwriter and a full-time multifamily investor with a portfolio of 160 doors valued at in excess of $22 million. As a former CMHC apartment building underwriter, he has analyzed hundreds of apartment deals in 3 provinces and 3 territories. He has analyzed more apartment buildings than most of the largest landlords in the country. Not only is he familiar with the front end of buying apartment buildings, but he's also very knowledgeable with the back end of the business. That is when apartment deals go sour and investors default on their loan, as he also managed the default management department of CMHC's Prairie office. Now, this wealth of knowledge and expertise enables Pierre-Paul to invest in apartment buildings strategically to ensure a sound return for his investors with low risk. Pierre-Paul has won numerous awards, including Multifamily Investor of the Year and Top Player of the Year with the Real Estate Investment Network, also known as RAIN, Service Provider of the Year in 2012 by the Canadian Real Estate Wealth magazine, and for his multifamily training program. He's also a national speaker and trainer on the subject of multifamily investing. Now, Pierre-Paul wants to make multifamily investing accessible to all investors in Canada. And in order to do that, he feels it's his purpose to instruct, empower, and inspire. So don't go away, because when I return, I'm going to be joined by my good friend and guest today, Pierre-Paul Turgeon. Hey, thanks for joining me on today's show, Real Estate Investing Monday, where we talk with a successful real estate investor about the business of real estate investing. Today, I'm fortunate to have Pierre-Paul Turgeon join me on the show. Pierre-Paul and I met probably back in 2011 or so when we both joined the same mastermind. Pierre-Paul had already established himself as in the business of multifamily investing and was embarking on his speaking and training career at that point in time in his life. Now, Pierre-Paul focuses on both aspects of his business, investing in apartment buildings and educating determined real estate investors who want bigger profits for less work by switching from investing in small rental properties to multifamily apartment buildings. Now, he helps them get started from scratch in investing in apartment buildings by helping them get over the psychological hurdle a lot of investors have when they transition from small single-family homes into larger rental properties. And he does that by helping them with the market research, educating them on how to do the market research, analyze, mitigate risks involved, how to obtain the best financing terms and conditions, as well as the best strategies to make money. Pierre-Paul does this through the only live experiential training course over a 3-day period. He's also in the process of working with an international digital consultant to complete his online course that he hopes to deliver in the near future. Now, Pierre-Paul has also won countless awards from the Canadian Wealth Magazine organization as well as RAIN since I've known him. So please give it up with likes, love, shares, and a virtual flurry of thumbs up and heart icons across the screen for my guest today, Pierre-Paul. Welcome, Pierre-Paul.
Thank you, John. Nice to be with you today.
How you doing?
Fantastic, John. Fantastic. Yeah, it's a good life. Busy life, but it's a good life.
Well, that's great. It's great that it's good, and it's also great that it's busy, as long as it's not busy work, as long as it's actually busy, productive work. Because a lot of us can get get caught up in that busyness of thinking that they're busy doing work, but really it's just a lot of busyness. I know I fall prey to that on a regular basis. It's like, I'm too busy, but really I'm not busy doing productive stuff. I'm just, busy doing stuff that really is not contributing to myself moving forward. I'll be the first one to admit it.
Well, I think I'm being productive, busy, but I always make sure to take time off with my family and travel and do things that you like. You only
For
live
sure.
but once, and when you're dead, you're done. So that the good times roll, as Ray Charles would say.
No, for sure. And I've definitely, we're friends on Facebook, have been for some time. So I definitely see all the traveling that you do with your family and all the life experiences that you guys are living. So it's real estate can help create that kind of a life, as well as having your own business can really help create that kind of life, as long as you make it a priority. Because a lot of times investors or entrepreneurs will not make that aspect of their life a priority, and they'll end up working 12, 14, 18 hours a day, putting in that grind, doing what's necessary in order to move on or try to make that buck, but they're really sacrificing the quality of life that they have right now. My opinion, just my opinion. What do I know?
Yeah, well, I tell you, I got a good advice once from Don R. Campbell, from the Real Estate Investment Network, is you got to build your business around your lifestyle, not your lifestyle around your business.
That's right.
And that's what, I'm managing to do for sure.
Yeah, and I've subscribed to that notion definitely for the past 5 or 6 years, and I'm one to always, as long as I can create ways to generate income, I'm always the first one to catch a last minute vacation somewhere, or go away for a month at a time. So I don't want to have regrets. I don't want to regret not doing something or not being able to do something because of just the way that my life is structured. So I definitely want to structure it in a way that I can do those things. And I know that you're very much the same way.
For sure.
Well, Pierre-Paul, before we get into the questions too much, I don't know how many of these shows you've actually watched, but the first thing I want to do before we get too far in the interview is called a speed round of questions. Don't worry, you don't have to, there's nothing you needed to study for. There's no pass or fail. You're not going to be graded on any of this stuff. It's just a series of 10 questions so the viewer can actually get to know a little bit more about you, both from the personal standpoint as well as a business standpoint. And so just come up, just say what the first things that come to your mind. And as always, I'd like to invite everyone that's watching to go ahead and play along with Pierre-Paul and type in your answers in the comments section. And if you haven't done so already, please love, share this video on your Facebook feed, as well as any business pages that you belong to and groups that you belong to as well. So are you all set, Pierre-Paul?
Absolutely ready, John. Let's go.
All right. So number one, name the book that impacted your life the most.
A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. This is about figuring out what your ego is and identifying your ego and being able to, at times, distance yourself from your ego. So A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Not an easy read, but a life-impacting book for sure.
Very nice. And when you were a young boy, who was your celebrity crush?
Oh, Raquel Welch. You're probably too young to remember her, but she was hot.
I remember her, trust me.
Oh, you're revealing your age, John.
Yeah, I'm not that young. I might look young, but I'm not that young. So what is either a book, a podcast, or a show that you're into right now?
In line with this new phase of my life as a full-time entrepreneur and creating a life that we want, I'm right now reading or listening to an audio book called Life Visioning by Michael Beckwith. Okay. So this is just visualizing the kind of life that you want, right? I'm still a fairly new entrepreneur. It's been, almost 7 years full-time in multifamily investing. So, but, as time goes by, I want to focus in more on the kind of life that I want. So it's called Life Visioning. I highly recommend it. Michael Beckwith was in that movie, The Secret, actually, along with John Assaraf and those guys. So very cool stuff.
Excellent. So are you currently working with any coaches?
No, I hate to say, John. Well, other than my digital consultant.
I was just going to say, you were telling me off screen that you're working with a digital marketing coach.
Yeah, that is a form of coaching, right? He helps me put together the content for my online course. So, definitely, yeah.
And what's your favorite movie of all time?
My favorite movie of all times, it's a series of movies, the Indiana Jones movies, actually, I really loved. Very adventurous in foreign countries, tropical jungles and all of that stuff. So Indiana Jones.
Okay. And are you currently involved in any masterminds?
And a very small one, yes, and on an ongoing basis, somebody that does the same as I do. I mean, in the real estate investing part,
Yeah.
yeah, on a daily basis, just to develop best practices, what works out, marketing. Everything is changing, and especially here in Alberta. So yeah, I am involved in a small masterminding group, which we intend to enlarge.
Very nice.
Yes.
So name a person, either dead or alive, who you'd most like to meet and have dinner with.
Oh, the Dalai Lama.
Okay.
I want to be as peaceful as he is.
Yeah.
Still, it's work in progress.
So what's your favorite type of vacation? I think I already know this one. Out of these two, which is your favorite type, beach or adventure tour?
Well, it's definitely adventure, right? My last big trip this year was on a 5-day trek to Machu Picchu with my son, with a guide, and and mountain biking in Bolivia at 4,700 meters. So I like adventure trips.
Excellent. And what's the best business advice you ever received?
Well, I shared one that Don Campbell gave me once, but I like Brendan Burchard's advice. Don't let your small business make you small-minded. I think we always underestimate our potential, and to me, as a new entrepreneur, I don't want to let my small business make me small-minded. So that's why I always try to expand my mind. So that's a great advice.
Very good. Now the last question is a two-parter. What is your favorite? Not what you consume on a regular basis, but which of these is your favorite? Water, beer, or wine? Pizza, wings, or salad?
That's a trick question, John. I mean, I love wings. That's my Friday night meal with a good beer or even a margarita.
Yeah.
But I drink a lot of water all day long. But my favorite, definitely wings.
Excellent. So Pierre-Paul, you were an underwriter with CMHC for quite some time prior to becoming an investor.
That's right.
So what were some of the things that you learned from your experience as an underwriter that really helped you in the investing world, especially in multifamily?
Well, the first thing I got to tell you, John, while I was an underwriter at CMHC, the first thing that that became very apparent to me is how much money multifamily owners can make by owning apartment buildings. So that certainly the light bulb went on at that very moment.
Yeah.
But what I learned in that course, in the course of working for CMHC, that's tremendously helpful in my own investments and when I teach this, is how to very carefully and thoroughly assess risks as they pertain to investing in apartment buildings and how to mitigate them. And I need to tell you something that you haven't mentioned regarding myself. Before I was a multifamily underwriter, John, I was also in charge of the department called Default Management and Real Estate Department.
Okay.
So my job was to manage defaults of apartment buildings as well as the defaults for smaller investors, right, basically, or homeowners, basically. Yeah. That was the real estate side of things. So I always look at real estate investing in apartment buildings on the defensive. What is the worst case scenario that could happen, and mitigate those risks up front. So that served me extremely well in my investments now, and when I teach this material to students of mine.
Especially when you are presenting this package to the lenders and the underwriters. Because because you have that knowledge, that background information, you know what questions they're going to ask or what specific things they're going to look for. So you can package this investment together in such a way that it's going to get approved much easier than if somebody just starting into this business tries to put a deal together and they're sending in the information.
John, there's no doubt. Thank you for raising that. I mean, for me, this is my fun. When I'm ready, when I've got a deal under contract and I'm in the process of, developing my own financing application, I know what buttons to push and those not to push when I submit a financing application to the bank. The reason being, John, that I used to be the guy when those banks were sending deals to CMHC to insure. I used to be the guy telling the banks, this is what you need to give me in order for me to approve your loan. So it's a very preemptive kind of approach and proactive approach, absolutely, and it builds your credibility when you know what buttons to push. And my credibility with the lenders, 160 doors in my world is I'm still a small player.
Yeah.
However, the way I play the game of investing in apartment buildings and getting financing is at the top level of the big REITs, the big real estate investment trust and so on. I take that very seriously, and it works in my favor. The lenders do love working with me because they know my stuff is impeccable. I'm not trying to create trouble. I'm just trying to really provide a sound assessment for the investment and convince the bank. If it's good enough for the bank, by the way, John, it's going to be good enough for investors of mine, right? So that's how I look at it.
And I'm quite sure that also when they see an investment package coming in from you, that they're, because chances are, it is, even the lending world is still a small world. Chances are you dealing with the same people on a regular basis.
Always.
It's the same, core group of underwriters that see your stuff. So when they see something coming from you as opposed to Sally Smith, who maybe not have the experience and not have the education and hasn't worked for CMHC, that they're very comfortable, because chances are you're not going to submit something unless you are 99.9% assured it's going to get approved.
And because I know the game very well, you're correct. I mean, I know before I even submit my financing application what can get approved or not approved. And I don't try to push the envelope, John. Right? You want to have the lenders on your side because it's part of the game, and they provide you with the financing. And, they return it well, so for sure relationships are critical, and your reputation in this business is critical. So you got to do things right at the onset. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. So how and why did you transition from working, and when did you transition from working with CMHC to becoming a full-time real estate investor? So how much real estate did you actually have done, had you done prior to actually leaving your job?
Well, so it depends which angle you look at when you answer that question.
Okay.
So personally, very little. My wife had bought single properties before we were married, actually. But personally, very little. Personally, however, John, I had insured hundreds of deals in 3 provinces, 2 territories. So, and it's the same process that I do now. The only difference now is I do it for personal reasons, because I'm purchasing those assets on behalf of my investors and myself. But the process of analyzing a multifamily property is identical to what I used to do when I was an underwriter. So hundreds of them. However, the good news is I was able to learn while somebody else was taking on the risks.
Right.
So it's a nice way to learn. And, of course, I developed a process and methodologies accordingly to be able to analyze these investment properties very fast. Yes.
So how long has it been, and what made you actually make that move from, I'm going to stop being an employee and I'm going to become an entrepreneur real estate investor?
And the question you said, how did you do it? I did it the hard way, John. One day, first of all, it's been 6.5 years. It's going to be 7 years this coming March. Did it the hard way without a parachute, hoping that I would build wings on my way down. And you and I, when we first met, these were tough years. The initial first 2-3 years, I'll be very honest with people. I don't want to make this sound like it's easy. No. It's not. And that's why, when you were asking me some of these questions, I want to help the determined investor, because you need to be determined and perseverant to do this. But I will honestly say the first 3 years of doing this, after I left my cushy job, 6-figure salary, best pension plan at CMHC, for the first 3 years, John, I was like a deer in headlights. I was in a state of fear. Looking back, I realized it for a full 3 years, no exaggeration whatsoever. But why did I do it? Now I realize, being full-time entrepreneur, that I had that seed in me, and it's the dream that many of us have as human beings. Wanted to be in control of my life, wanted to take possession, reclaim my agenda, my personal life agenda. Yeah. When you're an employee, you're trading time for money. And right now, if I want, as soon as we finish this broadcast today, I can go to a yoga class in the middle of the afternoon, or go down, trekking in Peru with my son like I did in March. Yeah. So I have a great degree of freedom, but especially, John, a greater degree of freedom of thought. I'm very much aware now, because no corporation, no CMHC owns me. So that's the reason I was miserable in a cubicle. I couldn't stand that mentality. This being said, I don't want to be critical of CMHC at all, because I know this for a fact. You didn't mention that in my bio, but before I became a multifamily underwriter at CMHC, I was also working for CMHC International. helping other countries set up mortgage default insurance like we have in Canada. And I'll say this much about our housing finance system in Canada. Lots of stuff is going on right now. The rules are being tighter now to get mortgages and so on. But at the end of the day, John, I know this from experience, having traveled to foreign countries and helped other countries set up mortgage default insurance. We in Canada have the best housing finance system in the world, and CMHC is the reason for that. Also, the reason why we weathered the Great Recession of 2009 a lot better than most countries around the world. But at the end of the day, that wasn't enough for me. I wasn't happy in a cubicle. I needed that freedom. And I have a lot more freedom, but there's still an uphill battle. You know, I've been at this 6.5 years, but I am much happier, Pierre-Paul, where I am right now, with all the challenges that being an entrepreneur means. Yeah.
Very good. And so, Pierre-Paul, what are some of the biggest fears that people have when they're moving or transitioning from investing in single family to investing in multifamily?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, John. And I think the biggest fear people have is the fear of large numbers, right? Obviously, when you move into buying bigger properties, larger properties, you got to add a lot of zeros to your numbers, and it's a mindset thing, right? I mean, I'm the ninth child of a family of 12 kids in northwestern Quebec, poor family, a typical French Canadian family, used to be a typical size. And I grew up with that kind of fear and limiting beliefs, but that's the first thing that you need to overcome. And the way to do that is obviously to study what you're going to do, right? Plan well in advance. Like I said, especially in the multifamily world, because it is, as you mentioned earlier, a very restricted world. There's not a lot of players, not a lot of lenders, not a lot of mortgage brokers involved. So, it's a thin line. It's a tightrope. So you gotta plan well in advance. So by planning, that's how you overcome that fear of large numbers, by learning what you need to do to do it, to make your dream come true, to buy larger assets, basically. So that's what I would say. The fear of not knowing how, right? So you got to get over it and get somebody to help you, teach you before you make your first move.
And a lot of times, what I found with regards to real estate investing, people taking action, just like in business, is they end up what-ifing themselves to death. What if this happens? What if that happens? What am I going to do? And the way you get around that in real estate investing is actually making sure that you're structured properly from a corporation standpoint, so that if something, heaven forbid, does happen with this investment, that it's the corporation that takes on a lot of the liability and a lot of the hardships, and not you personally. So ensuring that you are structured properly, I think, is one great way to mitigate some of the risks.
Yeah, and I got to stop you there, John, because I tell you what, to some extent you're right, but to some extent that's not necessarily the case. The reason being that when you buy an apartment building, yes, you buy it under a corporation. Most of us will do. I mean, that's something for people to consult with their accountant. But in my case, I always set up a corporation, separate corporation, to purchase each asset. However, you need to know that somebody has to provide a personal guarantee over and above the corporate guarantee, or the borrower's guarantee, if you will. Right. So you need to know that's one of the rules of the trade, unfortunately.
And that's why. Why you never. That's why you never want to own anything personally. Yeah. Because they can't sue a broke person. So if you personally don't own anything, and this all comes down to, I mean, I'm not making this stuff up, because the Rockefellers of the world, the Rothschilds of the world, they personally don't own anything. Everything is owned by corporations. Yes. So when they give their personal guarantee, there's nothing for anybody to come back at them on. They can come back at them, but they don't, because they personally don't own anything. They can sue them all they want, and there's nothing they're ever going to get. So I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV. You are a lawyer. So, and you don't play one on TV, but you're an actual lawyer. So we're not here to give legal advice or anything like that. But there are ways to mitigate your risks when you come to structuring and risk management, because that's an actual, that's a real thing. I mean, we have our own risk management lawyers that help us structure things to mitigate those risks. So I'm not here.
And if I may say, John, on just mitigating that, John, simply just put more money down, right? Don't over leverage these loans, right? I mean, for example, I have as a general rule, I never exceed 75% of market value. So, so you have 25% of a buffer there, right? You
That's
have
right.
some equity in the property. So that's one of the ways to mitigate that. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Remember, I said earlier, I used to manage the defaults at CMHC. And here's the good news about investing in apartment buildings. Generally speaking, if you've done your assessment of the market and the property itself, my experience at CMHC, I was bored out of my mind when I was managing defaults because there were no defaults.
Yeah.
And I kid you not something you could have shared with the public when I was at CMHC, but there are very few defaults, right? So if a property defaults on their mortgage, that's usually because the investor didn't do their homework properly up front.
Right.
So very low risk asset to hold for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of people's thoughts that when it comes to this bigger investing is that it actually takes a lot of money. And it has to be theirs, which is not the reality. So you talked about dealing with investors. So can you just touch on that a little bit? I'm sure that a lot of your students are thinking that too. Is like, oh, if I'm going to buy $1 million building, I have to have $250,000 plus dollars. But in reality, it's not. Typically, it's not you that has a lot of the money. It's you're bringing in investors. Can you just speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely, John. It is one of the limiting beliefs. So somebody needs to have money. There's no doubt about it. You need a down payment, right? And you need to cover your closing costs and all of that. And if you've got repairs, upgrades to do, somebody has to come up with the money. But yeah, the fact of the matter is, generally speaking, I do not put a cent into any of these purchases because I'm the expert that brings the deal to investors with very low overhead. I mean, I have a bookkeeper and an accountant and me. And everything is systemized and, on the cloud and everything. Mm-hmm. So very streamlined systems in place. But yeah, it is investors' money that with investors' money that I purchase these assets. But I'm an expert at it, right? And have the credibility and track record. But yes, you don't need to use your own money. I do not use my own money in most cases, very, very little. So that's, but I know what I'm doing, and that's where people need to start to learn how to do it from somebody who knows how to do it. And then, because it's all about systems. Like, you didn't mention that, John, but I have legal background as well. I'm no longer a practicing lawyer. I do not give legal advice, but I do have that training in me still. And when I was a litigator, so I love to go to court and plead a case. And my goal every time I was in front of a judge is to take the judge by the hand through my pleadings and lead him to the decision I wanted him or her to take. And that's exactly how I look at submitting a financing application or approaching investors. My job is to take the bank and investors by the hand, lead them to the conclusion that this is a sound asset. So I've got to come up with arguments, have done my market research to that, it's a sound market, that the asset is a good asset to purchase. So, but you have to have systems for, an analytical framework to do this. But it's the same process. It can be learned by anybody, Anybody can do this, Pierre-Paul. Yes, I have a leg up. I have an unfair advantage, which is why I teach like you, right? I realize I have an unfair advantage because I learned without taking a risk on all these hundreds of deals I have analyzed. But that's why I share this knowledge with people. But you need some knowledge before you venture into investing in apartment buildings for sure.
Yeah, definitely. In this bigger stuff, you definitely need to either work with somebody one-on-one as a coach and a mentor, or get started by taking some training for sure. Pierre-Paul, what are some of the biggest benefits that an individual can get from investing in multifamily versus single family?
Yeah, so that's a key question. So there's no doubt about it, John, that you can make way more money in multifamily properties versus single, small rental properties. Mm-hmm. First of all, it's a low risk asset. It's the first thing I think I should mention. One of the advantages, it's a low risk asset. After principal residences, multifamily properties or apartment buildings are the bank's favorite asset to land on. So first of all, and the reason for that is why it's a low risk asset to hold is because your risks are diluted among multiple units. For example, if you have a single home and it's vacant, you have 100% vacancy rate, right? Yeah. Whereas a 24-unit building, for example, you have one vacancy in your 24-unit building. It's a 4% vacancy rate, meaning that your property continues to operate at 96% capacity. You're still paying the principal down, still paying your mortgages, and still get a bit of a cash flow left at the end of the year. So that's some of the key advantages. Right now, John, the cost of borrowing for apartment buildings precisely because they're a low-risk asset, is ridiculously low. I haven't checked in the last couple of weeks, but until a month ago, for a loan amount, a very large loan amount, I haven't told you that yet, but I'm looking at buying brand new property, my largest asset yet, 124 doors. I could get a loan amount for $21 million a month ago for less than 2% or around 2% interest rate, CMHC insured.
Wow.
It's free money, John. And when you look at the amortization schedule, John, on a monthly basis, you pay more from month one from your first payment in principal than in interest. So your principal goes down there very fast. Now, that's CMHC insured. If you were to go non-CMHC insured with a conventional lender, your rate would be about 1% higher, but it still is 3% interest rate. It's free money. I mean, there's no other way of saying this.
What's the difference? What's the down payment difference in CMHC insured versus non-CMHC insured?
This is a very technical question, so it could warrant a longer answer, but I'm going to try to give it very brief answer. If you went CMHC, technically speaking, will go up to 85% of their lending value. Yeah. Unfortunately, people would think that means, I just put 15% down. No, I didn't say of market value. I said CMHC's lending value. And unfortunately, CMHC's lending value is always conservative and always below market value as a way to mitigate their risk. Mm-hmm. So that's for CMHC. So technically speaking, if you were to go CMHC, plan at least on putting down 20%. And as I said earlier, my rule is to put at least 25% of the market value down as a down payment. Okay. Conventional lenders, it'll always be, they'll use market value to assess the loan to value. And, it's at least, they'll go up to 75% of market value for a conventional lender. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And so right now,
there's more advantages, Don. Do you want me to carry on with the list, or?
There's no advantages? Is that what you said?
Oh yeah, there's more advantages.
Oh, more advantage. More advantage.
Multifamily. Can I carry on?
Yeah. Some of the biggest benefits. We're still talking about benefits.
Yeah. So greater economies of scale, right? Because if you have, again, let me continue with my 24-unit example. If I have a 24-unit apartment building, the operating expenses on a per unit basis go down the more units you have. The same boiler or hot water tank will heat all the units above. So your operating expenses tend to be lower because you have better economies of scale, mm-hmm. right? So that's one of the key things that you want to keep in mind. Now, your time, right? Because all units are under one building as opposed to multiple single homes. So you have more time to yourself to go on vacation and do the things that you love and spend time with your family and so on. So there a lot more time. Now, the biggest advantage, John, and if anybody remembers just one thing from today's podcast with you, is multifamily properties have a multiplier effect when it comes down to making a return on your money. Meaning that what drives value is the income that the property generates, the net operating income. Every time I'm able to increase my NOI, net operating income, and that's the income, not the net income, but it's the income before you service the debt, before your mortgage payments. Every time I increase my NOI by $1, the property will appreciate by about $16. So if you're in a good market, you're able to give $25 rent increase a month per unit times 20 units. You'll multiply the value of your apartment building by 16 times. You cannot do that with smaller rental properties. No. If you increase your rent, you'll increase your net cash flow. That's it, not the valuation. So this is how wealth is created. The only drawback, and maybe we can talk, and the other thing before I get into the cons of investing in apartment buildings, John, your credit never maxes out on large apartment buildings. Meaning, every time you buy an apartment building, you got to provide personal guarantees, you qualify. But if you buy the next building, the clock starts again. Whereas smaller rental properties, as you probably know, I know you know, your credit will eventually max out. So that doesn't happen with large rental properties. But the big lift effect, the fact that you can impact valuation simply by increasing your income, that's probably the biggest advantage. Now, do you want me to get into some of the disadvantages of buying, multifamily properties?
Just a couple. Let's just do a couple because I just wanted to get on to the next question.
Yeah. So, well, it's not an overnight success. It takes time, right? It does take time. You got to stabilize the property, and pay the principal down. So it does take time. It's not an overnight thing at all. Yeah, that's probably the biggest. You don't do this for the cash flow either.
No.
You really, the two profit centers are for the principal pay down and capital appreciation. So don't expect to roll in cash, net cash, immediately. It's going to take a little while before you get to that point.
Yeah, and so what do you see as maybe the top 2 or 3 mistakes that new investors are making when they're just starting out in multifamily?
Yeah, not planning enough, not doing their homework, not studying their market, and not taking their time, wanting to jump into it right away and make a lot of money right away. And as I just said, this is not going to happen. It doesn't happen that way unless you're lucky. Once in a while, you can hit a home run,
yeah.
Which is where you can, you can increase that valuation significantly because the property was mismanaged. But poor planning and not having contingencies in place, because we know real estate is cyclical. The market eventually will come down and will go up and down and up and down. So you got to plan. Novice investors don't plan for the hard times.
No.
And that is usually their downfall. Yeah.
Excellent. So we were talking a little bit that previously, Pierre-Paul, about this is not an overnight, you're not going to get rich overnight. And so many people think that investing in real estate is going to get them rich overnight. And most of it really comes from the seminar industry, selling people on that freedom, how they're going to make tons of money. So, but when you're making only $50 to $100 a door, which is suggested by the industry after all your expenses and your budgets are accounted for, most people aren't able to quit their job anytime soon. I mean, especially if you're doing single family and you're making, $50 to $100 a door. So where is the real, I know you touched on this, but let's go into it a little bit deeper.
Yep.
Where's the real money in multifamily investing, and how long is it going to take for an investor to start to see that real wealth?
Yeah. First of all, don't do what I've done, guys. Do not quit your job like I did without a parachute, like I described to you. And I wanted to make a point of describing how hard it was.
Yeah.
And it's taken me many years. But to answer your question succinctly, it takes a bare minimum. And of course, John, we both know that every market is different. Mm-hmm. So we are, both of us in Alberta, until the last couple of years, we had it pretty good. We've had an upward ride. Our market was doing very well. So depending how the market behaves, but bare minimum, you need at least 5 years. And better than that, I'd say 7 to 10 years, really. Yeah. So that's a reality check for everybody listening to this show. It doesn't happen overnight. And the money is real. And the reason for this is, as you said, right, you get $50 to $100 per unit in terms of profit a year. That's not much. But it's in the principal pay down, which, as I indicated earlier in my example, these days the cost of money is very low. So you are able to pay the principal down fairly fast. And appreciation, again, depending on how your market is behaving. Yeah. So that's where the money is, but it's anything but short term. So don't quit your job. Don't do what I've done. I would not recommend that anybody to do that. But sometimes in life, when you must, you must. Yeah. And I was in that position where I was miserable in my cubicle at CMHC. So I had to do it, and I did it. So not a short term get rich. The one thing, John, I do want to allude, so it is generally long-term, but I've had a good run in the last few years. I've had a few home runs. So based on what I said earlier, if you end up, sometimes you can hit a home run, right, where you can, within a short time frame, really increase the valuation of the property and then go and refinance and take out a lot of equity. And I have been very successful in the last couple of years with those. So that's a short term, but you got to know what to look for, which is also something that I obviously teach and give you case studies when I teach this stuff. But generally speaking, overall, it's 5 to 10 years, basically, time frame before you start seeing any real money.
Yeah.
However, if you're patient enough, after that, John, it's gravy year after year, right? Because you've paid the principal down. You don't have to continue to refinance, if you will. You can continue paying it down. I mean, this is a different conversation, a much longer conversation, and philosophical conversation, I would say, also, depending on your values.
Yeah. So I know you're not going to be able to see this, but I'm just going to draw with my fingers, Pierre. So what will happen typically in the Canadian economy, every 10 to 15 years, typically, price values will close to double. Now that's typically single family home, but if you think about it in terms of multifamily, what's happening is everything is getting more expensive. In that 10 to 15 years, everything is getting more expensive, which means rents are rising, which in the multifamily world means that the value of your property is increasing. Now during that 10 to 15 years, at the same time, you're paying down the principal, so your mortgage value is decreasing. So if we look at a 10-year time frame, the mortgage value is going to go down, the value of your property is going to go up. So the gap widens between what the value of the property is and how much you actually owe on the principal of the mortgage. And it's that point in time when you refinance up to just what the property can support. You don't refinance too much. And then you pull that money out tax-free. That's where the real wealth in real estate, whether you're doing single family, multifamily, or commercial, that's the real wealth, is being able to pull that money out tax-free. And typically when I look at in the real estate game, I'm looking at a minimum 10-year window. So it's like a 10-year, you're looking to be in this business for a minimum 10 years before you can do that refinance and start pulling some money out that you can live off of tax-free. So if you're doing single family, for example, if you just buy one house a year for 10 years, then in year 11, you can refinance the first one, and you can continue to do that for the rest of your life, and you'll live tax-free for the rest of your life by living off borrowed money. Obviously, in the multifamily, that spread is much bigger. Those numbers are much larger, so you're able to live a much more comfortable life. We'll just put it that way.
I completely agree. And when I'm down, when I'm discouraged some days, John, I crunch those numbers. I'm saying I only have a few more years before life gets so nice, but it is already pretty nice. But you got it bang on, John. Absolutely, yeah.
So what do you look for when you're out shopping for a new building to invest in? So maybe list off some of your main criteria that you look at.
So most of at this point, my portfolio is comprised of existing properties. So properties built between the 60s up to the late 70s. So they're existing properties. So I look for, first of all, where is the property located? It's got to be in a market with sound economic drivers like GDP growth, population growth, and so on. So I make sure that the market area is good, but specifically about the property, I'll pay close attention to the remaining economic life of the entire building, the building envelope, mechanical systems, electrical systems, and so on. Because the first 5 years, actuaries have figured out that most defaults occur within the first 5 years of ownership. So when I find a property, I immediately want to assess the remaining economic life of all these things, the building and its building components, to know whether I need that money up front. If it's beyond 5 years, then I know I'm good for the first 5 years to stabilize the property and make a dent into paying the principal down without having major capital cost involved. So I look for the remaining economic life of the building and its components. Another thing that I look for are undermanaged properties, right, where perhaps the rents are below market average. Then that means that this is one of those potential home runs where I can go in, fix the problem, maybe do some minor repairs, nothing major like replacing a roof.
Yeah.
Make the suites look pretty, maybe improve curb appeal, increase my rents, and then jack up value significantly. And as you mentioned earlier, go and refinance, pull a lot of money out. So I look for those undermanaged properties. So those are some of the key items that I look for in a property.
Excellent. So Pierre-Paul, it appears that from what I understand, because I do a lot of networking here in Edmonton, that the multifamily investing business is controlled really by a tight-knit group of investors. So how does one get into the game, and how important is your past experiences, your reputation, things like that when it comes to investing in multifamily?
It's bottom line, John. It's a great question again. It's critical. Your reputation in this world is critical. It's a small world, as I mentioned earlier. There's only a small number of banks, mortgage brokers, realtors. So you get around that by, once again, planning carefully your move before you start investing into multifamily properties, because everybody's going to look at you as a novice multifamily investor or inexperienced multifamily investor with a great dose of skepticism. So by doing your homework, studying the market, knowing what questions to ask, you build your credibility, your reputation. And I can tell you from past experiences, students of mine that didn't do their homework and were quickly blacklisted within the community. I mean, you're right. Edmonton is even a smaller market, but what we're talking about right now, building that credibility, applies everywhere in Canada, John. It's a small world. So you want to make sure that you do your homework very, very carefully, so that you ask smart questions and you do not waste anybody's time, whether it's the lender's time, the bank's time, or the realtor's time. And over time, once people see that you've done your homework, you're asking smart questions, intelligent, relevant questions, then it builds up your credibility. I don't know if we're going to have a chance to talk about that, but I've got an ebook people can download, on the internet at multifamilyinvestingcanada.com, multifamilyinvestingcanada.com. 5 key questions you need to answer before you make your move into multifamily investing. And one of the key questions they're going to ask you, John, where's the money going to come from, right? I talked about earlier how I do it. I raise money from friends and family. And the good news is, once you do this right, the system I use, I have repeat investors. It's always the same people that come with me. Many millions of dollars, some of them have invested with me because I use a system. But the idea is to build that credibility slowly and, approach these people with smart questions, and identify where the money is going to come from is a critical question. But before you do that, you need to know what properties are valued at. So you need to do some homework, study your market, and figure out how much money you need, what size of property you're going to buy in what market, newer, older properties, and so on. So when I was developing the planning module for my online course, John, I never realized how much was going into the planning phase until I sat down and wrote it out. It's a huge amount of work.
And what we'll do is we'll make that link available to the website where they can download that PDF. We'll make that available in the comments section, and as well as it'll also be available in all of the website, YouTube as well. So we'll do that sometime after the show has already been aired. So you just spoke a little bit about your course there, Pierre-Paul. So I know you're currently working on that, helping other real estate investors get into multifamily investing. Can you tell us a little bit more about your course and how it's maybe different from some of the other multifamily courses that are being taught out there?
Yeah. So first of all, this is a labor of love. As I mentioned earlier, I think it was before we got online, I started this project 4 years ago. The reason why I haven't completed it yet, and I'm somebody that finishes what he starts, is because I've been busy buying 1 or 2 buildings a year, or refinancing 1 or 2 a year. So it's been a successful run. But why is it different? First of all, my background, John, I've got legal background. I've got that CMHC background, not only just at the front end of the business, which is when people buy these apartment buildings, but also, as I mentioned earlier, when these deals go sour. So when I teach this material, I don't know anybody in all humility in Canada, and as you know, I speak across the country on this subject of multifamily investing. I don't know anybody with my background. So I come in with an offensive and defensive almost approach, thinking what's the worst case scenario when I buy an apartment building. So I don't know anybody with my background to begin with that can teach it this way. My live event that is taught, as you said, over 2.5 days in Edmonton, and we're going to have the next event in the spring in Edmonton, probably in May. And again, if people go on that website, multifamilyinvestingcanada.com, I'll keep them abreast of when I'm doing this. And I don't send a lot of stuff out. Like, I'm not one of those, I don't have time because I'm busy investing. But it's experiential, meaning that I take these people to one of my buildings. They complete an inspection with a building inspector. They go up on the roof, they inspect the boiler room and each of the suites with a professional building inspector. Then I bring them back to a classroom. I have guest speakers, a realtor, a mortgage broker, and with me obviously as a keynote speaker. And we go through the entire analysis using actual case studies of mine, buildings of mine, how to make money, how to assess them, how to do the homework from submitting an offer and so on. Yeah. And it's the same thing with my online course. It's very hands-on. There's short, there's about 9 modules, small videos in each of the module for each topic. So you don't have to sit there for an hour and a half to go through one specific topic. You go through each of the risk factors, your property risk factor, your market risk factor, and your valuation risk factor, and finally you as a borrower, your risk factor, and how to assess these risks and how to mitigate them. So I don't know of anybody with my background who teaches it this hands-on. Oh, and by the way, I've got same spreadsheet. If you don't know how to use Excel, don't worry, don't freak out, because if it's a green cell, you put in a number. The formulas are all there, and you need a password to change the formula if you want to, to change the formulas. But it's the exact same spreadsheet I used to use at CMHC that enabled me to analyze these deals very fast, and while at the same time ensuring I'm not forgetting anything. It's a checklist process. So I'm giving you my tools, absolutely my tools, and I'm super active. I mean, I'm current. I just refinanced my last deal in July, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm looking at buying a brand new property of 124 units. So I don't know anybody that can provide that insider knowledge as I can.
Did you, I might have missed it, because I know you used to do on-site, take people on to an apartment building. Do you still do that?
Yeah, in my live event, the one I'm going to have again in the spring, absolutely. That's why it's experiential. So they come, first thing we do in the course, we take them to complete an inspection with 2 building inspectors, the whole shebang. And then we bring them back to a classroom for 2 days and walk them through the full analysis of how to present an offer on a multifamily, how to analyze the risk factors, how to crunch the numbers, and how to prepare your financing application. John, preparing your financing application is a lot of work. I'm not going to deny that to you. I do my own. But if you were to hire a mortgage broker, the mortgage broker will charge you 1% of the loan amount. So do the math. If you buy a multi-million-dollar building, how much the mortgage broker is going to charge you. If you take my course, I teach you how to do it. I give you a sample, a format, a template, if you will, and you saved yourself right there a lot of thousands of dollars in a mortgage broker fee. Wow. I'm not saying not to use a mortgage broker fee, but as I said, my mission is to make investing in multifamily properties accessible to all Canadians who wish to do it, and to empower people. It's one of my core missions. So I teach people how to do their financing application on their own without resorting to paying a mortgage broker. Sometimes hiring a mortgage broker might make sense, but at least you have the choice.
Excellent. Well, that's all the time that we have today, Pierre-Paul. I want to personally thank you for being on the show and sharing with us all your insights into multifamily investing. Like I said, I'll post some contact information in the comment section of today's show notes that you can connect with Pierre-Paul, and definitely go check out the website, download that PDF, as well as check out the upcoming course in Edmonton. And everyone show Pierre-Paul some love by hitting that like button, love button, and be sure to share this on your Facebook page, as well as any feeds that you Facebook pages or any groups that you belong to. So again, Pierre-Paul, I want to thank you very much for being on the show, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.
Sounds good, John. Thank you for having me on. Cheers.
Right. And everyone else, just stick around for closing remarks. Well, thanks for joining me on today's John A. McCabe Show, where we work with entrepreneurs, business owners, authors, experts, and speakers, get seen, get heard, get noticed anywhere, anytime, on any device. Now, also known as the Authority Acceleration Blueprint. Now, if you're someone who's looking to take your business to the next level and want to get some coaching advice, why not apply to be a guest on today's show? Now, for most entrepreneurs, we want to create a life of our own, create our own path, and do what we can to reach our own desired outcome, which is generally freedom. Freedom to choose what we want to do, when we want to do it, and with whom we want to do it. A life that's full of options and choices, where we worry less about money and more about the quality of time that we spend with others. Now, a great way to make that happen is to leverage other people's knowledge, time, and skill sets. Step one to reaching our freedom life is to realize that you can't do it alone. Working with a coach or being involved in masterminds is a great way for entrepreneurs to move their business forward. Now, a coach can help you shorten the time frame to get you from where you are to where you want to be, while being part of a mastermind is meant to bring entrepreneurs together, all with the goal of helping each other move forward with their business. Now, the second step to creating the life you envision for yourself as an entrepreneur is to implement systems into your business so you can streamline your operations, leverage systems, and free up your time to focus on your family, having fun, and the highest leverage activities in your business. The activities that get you the biggest return on your time invested, the ones that truly make you money. Now, sometimes we just don't know what systems we need, how to implement those systems, or even have the time to find out what is needed. Now, working with a coach or consultant that understands, uses, and specializes in systems that can streamline your operations can help save you time, aggravation, and make you a lot more money. Now, for example, having a system or strategy that allows you to leverage just 15 hours of your time into enough repurposed content to get you seen, get you heard, get you noticed anywhere, anytime, on any device is a great example of leverage. Now, just imagine a system where you invest just 15 hours of your time, and the end result is you're a #1 best-selling author. You have enough content that's going to get you seen, get you heard, get you noticed anywhere, anytime, on any device. You have a successful podcast. Now it's automatically attracting more attention, giving more value, and generating more leads, which enables you to attract an abundance of paying customers. Now this is also known as the Authority Acceleration Blueprint. Now, to find out more about the Authority Acceleration Blueprint, coaching program, or mastermind, then contact me via my website at johnamccabe.com or connect with me through my show's Facebook page. Now, again, thank you for joining us on today's show, and I look forward to seeing you on tomorrow's show when I have another great guest on discussing their business and accelerating their authority. So have yourself an amazing day, and I look forward to seeing you again real soon.